Okay. Hi, everyone.
Good to see you.
It's good seeing you guys. Okay, let's have some fun. Let's dig in, right? Okay, so we're talking digital. We're talking transformation in that kind of chocolate and peanut butter moment. It seems like we can't talk about those two things without talking about cloud, right? Bum, bum, bum.
Yep, there it is.
But there's a funny thing, I think, when people start to talk about cloud. We have a really set definition in specific stakeholders' minds about what cloud is, what the value is. It's just not a common definition of what cloud is.
No.
So I wanted to kind of try to bust through that, and I figured you guys were the perfect people to have this conversation with. So let's talk about the value of cloud when we talk about digital experiences, right? What is the value for the stakeholders as opposed to just for IT, right? So for the business, what are we talking about? So I'm going to start with you. I know, I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Just on the spot. Well, I think the business value comes to, in the cloud with cloud native solutions, that there is a level of confidence that comes with knowing that your systems are going to be up and running. There's business resiliency to that, and you're building out your brand trust. And let me just give you, for example, statistic here. 60% of the 7.8 billion people in 2020 were online. What did that do to the websites? Right? Huge, right? 40% of organizations found spikes in their traffic more than they do see seasonality-wise.
Right.
And some of them fell down, right? They couldn't handle that amount of traffic. And so we did a SaaS Path survey at IDC, and it shows 70% of organizations will prefer a cloud-native solution in order to continue that business resiliency. So confidence is key in driving a lot of organizations.
And that's a huge point of value, right? So when we're talking about defining that value for the stakeholder, everyone's got a different job they're trying to get done.
Correct. I mean, for my side, what I've seen is it's basically a connector and an enabler for IT to, instead of being that area of the business that has to say no, or we can't do that, or the system won't stay up. Sorry, Chief Marketing Officer, you can't run that campaign in the middle of the day. Right. Or you can't do inventory refreshes every 5 minutes because the system can't do that. It allows the business to say yes. It allows IT to go faster and focus on working on solving business problems and enabling rather than solving IT issues and issues with the infrastructure and services.
It's solving them in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it also starts to reframe real time, and we'll touch on that, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But I want to come to ask you, Rodrigo, when you start to talk about value for the stakeholders, I think we're also talking about some non-traditional stakeholders too, right? It's not just the like CMO and the CIO battling out like, when can I send this out, or like, you know, how many loads in the washer can I put in, right? It's a completely different stakeholder unit. So I wanted to ask you about that. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so all these aspects that we just discussed are fundamental in bringing value to these additional stakeholders. And when you look at the total value equation and you see the benefits that the cloud have, starting to untether infrastructure, untether processes from the day-to-day of what the enterprises need to care about, deliver that through a cloud provider, and have the enterprise care about business processes that add value to them, how they can be the best consumer goods company in the planet, how can they have the best supply chain in the planet. All of that is where the attention is at versus the focus on infrastructure. So that's one of the fundamental benefits that the cloud provides, is that ability to untether worrying about infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure, to move the attention to differentiation, faster pace of innovation, and all of that. Right.
Yeah, I love that. Because, I mean, fundamentally, we're talking about, instead of just having the, like, where did we store it? Where did we lift and shift it to, right? Like, how many people, are we hybrid? Are we cloud? Are we not? Thank God, right? We're starting to talk about experiences. It's now experiences powered because we're on the cloud.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And so what are you seeing there? Because I think that starts a very different conversation when you're talking about stakeholders. How are you getting your job done?
Yeah, if you think about it, we talk about moments that matter in HCL software and how do you adapt to those, and really giving governments and healthcare companies the power to be able to put those processes online that are essential. We've seen this with state and local governments just being able to communicate at scale massively during when the governor comes out and gives a presentation on COVID.
Right,
And all of
right.
a sudden, everyone goes there. Well, you've got to answer the mail there. And the way I look at it, it almost goes back to the days where networking was not ubiquitous, right? It was slow. I'm never going to use my mobile device for this. Right. I'm going to call somebody. Now
Pay for that? Yeah.
Now we just have access to it. Well, I think compute and all of that, it's so much more than that. It's just available.
Yeah.
That speeds up agility of businesses to react. Yep. But then I'll just end with one last point, which by definition, reacting globally too. So in some countries, I need to do it this way. In other countries, I need to do it that way. And I think cloud native is really about enabling that with enterprise software, not commodity.
It's options. That's really what it comes down to. It just
Precisely.
gives you a lot more options.
And gosh, didn't we have to learn that during the pandemic
Yeah.
the hard way, right? Because it also wasn't about options. I mean, yes, massive business shifts, new business models on the fly.
Yeah.
Everyone has to behave like everyone else. But then it was, where was everyone working?
Yeah.
Right, and I think we start to forget that cloud also has the opportunity to dramatically shift what we're delivering, who's delivering it, when, like it shifts both sides of the experience equation, like nothing we've seen, right? Because, I mean, talk about future of work, it's like the now of work, let's do this,
Yeah,
you know?
future of work has been not only accessibility, but also having the freedom and the flexibility, that agility to work when you want,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to time to value. How am I going to deliver this? With a cloud solution, you get the freedoms to develop at the hours you want and the applications that you want that drive back to that cost structure.
Yeah, without thinking about it. And I love the word you used earlier, having the confidence to be able to do it, right? It's about empowering your people to have the confidence as much as you're empowering your customer to do it. Like self-service on both sides.
Yeah. It's all
That's
about
happening because
delivery.
it's all about the delivery. So let's talk about the other buzz. We're gonna play a little buzzword bingo, right? Just a little. Everyone can tap in. It's fine, because like cloud, bang.
As long as you don't go to SOA, I'm okay.
I know.
We're not services oriented.
We're not going there.
We're not going there. Okay.
Watch
Dates
out.
myself.
Yeah, watch out. Like, we can't do that.
No
We've
problem.
just lost like everyone viewing.
Everyone
like,
there.
We're gone. We're gone. No, AI.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You can't get to all these big dreams, all of the things that we hear our teams talk about, quite frankly, all the things that our teams expect from their tools. Because if Netflix can tell you what you need to Netflix and chill with, why can't my system tell me what I need to do next, right? Cloud is gonna get us there, but it's interesting because you and I had a chance to talk about this earlier, right? And it's the issue of, it's about the data that can get us there. And cloud gets us to a whole new environment of data.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, ready for your next word? Microservices.
Boom,
No, I mean, seriously though, seriously, tee it up there. So microservices, to your point about AI and machine learning, has driven a level of processing into the cloud, as you've mentioned, that you could never have done on premise at the cost that
you
you're
couldn't
able to
afford
do
to
it. And
that
you couldn't
way.
afford it, right?
Yeah.
And so now we have data, which is coming from multiple sources. I mean, it's a plug and play model where I want to now connect in 5G, the edge, low orbit satellite data. All of it starts to come in and needs to be handled. Who can handle that? No one person.
Right.
But you bring in
I
machine
mean, it
learning.
can't be handled on spreadsheets?
Oh my goodness.
Come on.
I've seen that try.
We've been there, we've done that.
Where's my pen and paper? Right?
Abacus. maybe.
Well, abacus, exactly, so abacus. But here we talk about data security as well, and the data trust you have to put into it. And I love that you brought up the regions, right? Because now we're looking at hybrid cloud, where I can put the processing in one place, I can put the data in the others if regulatory reasons require that. And here we have now the processing power that we could never dream of, and I think you mentioned this before, about the time to innovation, to bring these ideas to life, are now at our fingertips, and it's just going to explode even more.
Right.
And data is huge, right? IDC has seen over the next 5 years, we're going to have 2.5 times the amount of data as we have in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And it's going to reach 180 zettabytes of data that we have to deal with.
Absolutely.
Where's your abacus for that?
Right,
yeah, I
right,
know that.
exactly, right. Let's see a
I
count
gave
that
up.
high. Yeah.
You can't count that high.
And another aspect that I think is super important associated to data, we see at Google, databases were very decentralized. You had a database serving for marketing purposes, financial purposes, the sales invoices, so on and so forth. Then we saw a second stage with creation of data lakes, where all of a sudden the enterprise was beginning to stitch together and have a common outlook,
Right.
view on these data sets through data lakes.
Yes.
That drove the ability to apply tools that generate insights.
Yeah.
From insights, now we have tools with machine learning and AI that drive creation of knowledge. So all of a sudden you went from just disparate databases
Right.
to a journey into now the databases are finally driving insights and knowledge
Oh, yeah.
to faster decision into the business. This is value that's delivered through the cloud and by the cloud through
Oh,
this
yeah,
cloud native
absolutely.
application. So it's a super, super important point for companies to pay attention to in this digital transformation process.
For sure.
And you need to be able to expand it, right? It's about, it's not just about your data anymore, it's the data of your partners. It's how do you bring all of that together?
Exactly.
How do you look for
How do you
shared signal?
instrument it? How do you
Exactly.
interpret it?
How do you get to it? How do you actually get to action from it? And then when you try to automate it,
Yeah.
Exactly.
you gotta be in the
Automation,
cloud, right?
right.
The,
It's
the only
the
place to do it.
automation.
Yeah.
And you mentioned such an important point. It's not only your data, it's the data of the ecosystem around you that you
Yep.
do business with. I think an example that's very much in vogue right now is the issue we're facing with the physical supply chain, with ships and
Oh, gosh.
containers
Yeah,
clogged.
yeah.
That's raw data.
Exactly.
If there weren't
Yeah.
clouds in the background, we might be able to see them all
Yeah, yeah, it's
piled
true.
up
It's
out
a little-
back
little-
there,
yeah,
and it'd be fine.
And the help is coming in that regard. So the concept of a digital twin to a supply chain, where you can mimic
love
all
that.
the links of a physical supply chain in a digital twin, and all of a sudden run models as to what are the weak points, how do we exchange data in a common data framework through the ecosystem in the supply chain,
Right.
and trying to deliver the faster value of that supply chain that you want to the end customer. How is data exchange between the partners? How do I extract value of that exchange and potentially monetize it? So all of that is actually this next wave of transformation that's happening right now.
It's about connectedness. That ecosystem has to be
Right,
connected together.
right.
The people, the data, the systems, all frictionless through the entire series to get to that point where we can have a supply chain that is, ubiquitous across every group and every industry.
And done in a way where privacy is all handled and the regulatory
Right.
aspects, which the underpinnings of the cloud technology allow for that.
That's
right.
And it allows for that to be a strategy.
Correct.
Right, because I think for a long time, we tend to look at security, at Constellation, we call it digital safety.
Yes.
We start to look at regulatory demands, security, and it's a checkbox, right?
Yeah.
It's like what Debbie and Bob down at Risk made us come and look
well,
at, right? They
Rodrigo
came
said
in.
it best, right? That's what the microservices do. You let somebody
Exactly.
else handle your security and your
Right.
OAuth services and
Precisely.
your compliance and regulatory needs.
Yep.
But it
It's
becomes
not all on you and your server.
Exactly, but it's also not a checklist anymore.
Yeah, right.
Because you can have AI reach into that data and look at things like observability tools.
Yes.
Let's look at things. It's not just the
Precisely.
unicorns of DevOps running around being like, I've done stuff. I'm doing stuff with purpose, and I think that becomes a really interesting part of what we're talking about here, right? Because we're talking about experience and engagements and thinking about those things differently,
Yeah.
dreaming up new experiences, but interrogating data differently.
That's right.
So that we get to more profitable outcomes. And I think that becomes the bridging gap with cloud, right? Where it begins to mean something for the business other than, so we saved a little money on that first lift and shift,
And connecting the whole discussion back to the very beginning, and you get to do all of it that you said, consumed as a service,
Yes.
with
Right.
enterprise-grade solutions ready for you, versus trying to develop it all in-house with a series of legacy systems that you perhaps has. And the value that leveraging cloud native tools brings to you ultimately is the dramatic acceleration of your pace of innovation.
Yeah.
That's such a
Yes.
critical element in the world we live in today. Companies disrupting businesses, disrupting each other, and they are able to do that because they're leveraging technology to the most.
And level of innovation that you're talking about also builds upon the relationships between data, the customer relationships that are built out. Now you start to see additional things that you could never have uncovered if you were
Right.
trying to look at it at a human
Right.
level. And now these very, almost so gold nuggets that you can start to pick up and take and build out on becomes value to putting the cloud in place in
Yeah.
the very beginning, right? It's a cost structure.
It also has laid some things bare too, right? Like if it did shine a bit of a light on things that maybe some people in the because you can't play the game of corporate don't touch my button
Right,
Yeah.
right.
when you're all trying to align around cloud. So you can't in IT be like, no, you can't have that cool tool with data, or marketing can't be over there like, no, it's all my customer data. No, you can't have it. Those games have to start falling away when we're intentionally looking at cloud transformation as the foundation for our digital transformation.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, and that's what we're all here talking about today, right? That's what people are listening in on. How do I take my digital experiences to the next level? Change? Like it's got to, you have to, it has
Your
to start.
consumers are going to force you. You're already seeing it now, right?
Right.
With, I think,
Your teams are going to force you.
100%. Yeah. Or if not, they'll go somewhere else where they are, because
That's
the
huge.
choice is available now. And
Yeah.
the expectation, if I can get food delivered to my car immediately,
And just
why can't I do this?
Yeah, and I think the best examples perhaps that were put in front of us were at the very beginning of the pandemic. The world was not ready to operate from home. So the companies that first were able to set up a digital platform that, hey, buy it online, tell me the spot in the parking lot where you're going to be at, and I will
Right.
put in the trunk for you.
Exactly.
The companies that got to that type of model first, being either electronics retailer or supermarket, doesn't matter, they won a lot of business.
Yes.
Why? Because
Yeah.
they were able to activate their cloud native platforms, readjust them fast to address a new business demand that was in front of them, and they got a lot of business as a function of that. The other ones that didn't, boy, had a
And we're going to hear a
harder
great
time.
example of that later today, right? where at Alpha Tame, an organization that, listen, how do you change the way people were buying cars
Unbelievable.
when they couldn't go touch the car? Like, awesome
Exactly.
example. We're going to hear from them
Amazing
in a little
example.
bit. So
Yep.
I'm excited about that. What are some of the other examples? Like, what are some of the examples that you've seen that were one of those examples of like, didn't see them being able to pull that one off?
Yeah, I mean, as Rodrigo said, at Proficient, we had clients come to us that said, I need a buy online, pick up at store, I need real-time inventory, I gotta figure this out. Now we have retailers with brick and mortar stores with inventory just sitting there. We had people buying record numbers of pets. How do you get your dog food?
Exactly.
And
Or the dog house. Like, what do you need?
exactly, when it's all sitting on a ship out there in the ocean. So it was all about the ability to quickly pivot, open up that inventory, go omni-channel, get everything exposed online. Things like Twilio for customer service, as Rodrigo was saying.
That amazing.
Hey, I'm here now. I'm in spot number 3.
Right.
That was all enabled by cloud native technologies.
Exactly.
And really,
I love
really,
that.
It just took what we thought was going to take 6 to 10 years of innovation happened in under a year and months.
But isn't it also nuts that like part of that innovation was also quite literally in allowing the customer's actual voice to come back into experience? Right? Because cloud allowed that. You could suddenly bring in Twilio where it was the phone, like it was literally the customer saying, I told you I was in spot 4, but I'm actually in spot 10. Oops,
Exactly.
where where they're on the phone doing it. And it was actually the customer, and the customer felt like they were part of it, and they didn't feel like they were working through technology.
Yep.
And I think, and we've all had a chance just hanging out here in the beautiful sunshine, talking about those types of issues where, for a long time, and I think in the early days when we wanted to talk about things like digital transformation, poof, the glitter just exploded, right? Digital transformation.
And 250 million with it, yes.
Yeah, right? It's right up there with master data management, right? When we started to talk about those things early on, we ended up in a position where we were asking our teams to transform around the technology we could implement, right?
Right.
Now we're in a very different situation. We have to really have, we have to have that technology that's going to work in the way that our teams want to. So what are some of those examples? You know, we've talked about examples of when our customer has really driven that type of change. But what about our internal customer? What are some of those examples of when it's been our internal customer, our teams, our people who are driving the change and the transformation for tools because they want to be good at delivering experiences? Any examples jump out for you
I've got
guys?
a great one. You know, in today's environment, at the speed we're going, you need partners to help you on this journey. And when you bring in a new partner outside of your organization, you need to be able to help them spin up your local development environment. You need to do that quickly. You need to do that securely. And Cloud Native has that figured out. You can now get a whole environment running in a container, ready to go for that software engineer, where that used to take sometimes weeks to do that. Oh, we got to set your laptop up, we got to get you connected to all these points. And now that's happening in days. With,
we're going to
with this
research our
type of
VPNs.
technology. So that's been a big one. Again, speed to innovate.
Yeah.
You need help, you need technical help, and they need access to your environments, and it needs to be secure, and it needs to be done quickly. So that's been a big one.
I really like the example Dave mentioned, and it gave teams also the ability to operate in regions that they were not before,
Precisely.
without having necessarily to set up infrastructure. So all of a sudden, if your company wanted to expand to the Middle East, you could rely on infrastructure that's available from cloud providers, and your attention would be about human resources that you need to hire in order to operate there, but not infrastructure to operate there. So that corporate agility on resource allocation wherever in the planet you need it, and also in whichever group within the organization that you need, as you said, Dave, really transform these organizations' ability to meet the customers where they are. Right?
But you mentioned something about that, right? You mentioned something about meeting customers where they are, because it's about having the opportunity to meet them in a culturally relevant and sensitive way. And that's a very different equation.
Yes, I mean, especially if you talk about things like language and empathy that you're trying to, exude through a digital form. Right? We've seen this shift from your favorite brand that you've been dealing with. Now you're going to the online version of it, looking at how do I re-invoke that physical type of experience in a digital experience. And you can't necessarily do it as fast by yourself. So what you do, you leverage partners, a community. You can plug in all these additional great innovations that are out there, plug those in. You have things like translation. You can move to the regions that you want as well. And then you have to deal with data security and privacy and trust that comes along with it. Those are the check boxes you have to have, but it really means something. If you can speak to someone in their language, you can have that visual impact that you want to have, not just a textual based one, but move to a more emotional based one.
And even with tools like AI, you can now allow them to actually ask you that question in their language. It's not just about North American language processing, right? Like that's not what the N stands for. Right?
Natural.
Exactly, that's not the N in that phrase. So all of a sudden, your customer is literally asking your digital product, help me, in their language, and now you can answer back.
And mobile, I mean, mobile has been the biggest shift, that we can see, and leveraging those little mini computers that can do a lot with that. And then how do you connect it back in? All the data that you want to leverage, you mentioned CDPs and customer data. Is it mine, or am I going to share it from marketing to sales to support, finance? All of them have access to the same consistency across the board. And the cloud allows you to bring in additional departments. You talked about internally, right? How do I have this 10 units of capacity? I might be using 2 units today. What digital application could I create to drive more revenue, to drive better services? Let's ask, right? Ask sales or whomever, and then you bring the partners in to help connect it in. And now you've got full capacity of your cloud infrastructure being used across the board.
Yeah, and when you go, to build on that point, when you go truly cloud native and you adopt hybrid models together with your cloud development, It allows you to even choose, you were talking about a mobile device, where to run. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
But in which footprint do you want to run your solutions? Meaning, in a hybrid environment, you can certainly have 100% in the private cloud, 80% in the public cloud,
Right.
a combination in between, and adjust that on the fly
Yeah.
without having to, one, worry about infrastructure allocation, two, without having to redevelop your application.
Right.
That is a fundamental new value
Yeah.
that's delivered through
Yes.
hybrid cloud, because once again, builds up on agility,
Yes.
and it does not drive repetition of work. It allows you to truly focus on innovating your business process to deliver more to your customer.
And
Yeah.
move your skills, your talent to something that has higher value
Exactly.
than repetitive things that you could push off
Driving
for
revenue
automation.
Right.
instead of driving
Right.
challenges in the infrastructure.
We had a great speaker at a Constellation event who said AI shouldn't be there to actually try to convince people that they weren't valuable.
No.
Right? It's not about devaluing the people. It's actually about
Yes.
augmenting, and it's about proving to them that
Making
they've
them
got
smarter.
they've got superpowers.
Right, yes.
Right?
At the
They've
end
got
of the day,
superpowers.
you unleash
How
them.
do we unleash those? Which I think is incredible. You know, I think the other interesting thing about this is that oftentimes the conversation around how do we capitalize on these cloud opportunities? How do we capitalize on these experience opportunities? These two conversations clash in the boardroom when the real land of no, the CFO, comes in and is like, ooh, remember how you guys did that last time and it didn't work? Explain to me how it's gonna work this time, right? And those are very real, honest conversations. I know that talking to business leaders, talking to CIOs, you hear it time and time again. There is just this battle fatigue that everyone seems to be going through. So let's talk KPIs, right? Because I think when we're going in and making a case for this needed transformation, we have to have KPIs and goals and metrics and clear points of value set up ahead of time so that all of the business stakeholders can say, okay, I get where I contribute to that. Let's talk about that as a shared value. You know, that's a KPI we all can get behind because it's a business KPI and not just some weird tech acronym, right? So what are the KPIs that you guys have seen really move the needle to get this to happen?
I was just going to say, I think one big one that I've seen, and this is something that's I've seen it done in the 90s even, but it's more pertinent today. It's aligning IT and business KPIs around delivery.
Yep.
And it's abstract on the IT side because it's the technical bits don't always necessarily align to the outcome, but creating a traceability model where that business goal that I just set to be able to effectively get these campaigns to increase the conversion rates from X to Y, and then the experience is used and the person gets there and solves the problem. How many business processes can I bring online in a year? You don't have to change people's compensation, but you change their awareness of the impact they're having. And then give IT and the delivery teams that KPI. Right? It's not about did you do something architecturally beautiful? That matters. But did you solve something?
Right.
And what was your role in it?
And maybe
linking it.
that's, you know, because I understand, like a lot of times we'll talk about compensation changes and do we have to align those compensations? And that's where it gets really ugly, like it just gets
You
to a
don't have
nasty
to.
conversation. But it's almost like, okay, but, you know, at the end of the day, we're all in business to do business. Like, and that's okay. Like, our goal is to have a profitable business. None of us want to actually go bankrupt.
more
Like,
profitable.
right, like and if you are a business that wants to do good, guess what? You can do more good if you make money. You know, so how do we get to those KPIs? So like, so I think that's great. Like, give them that roadmap.
Yes.
This is where we all have to work. What are some of the KPIs you've seen?
Yeah, I
work?
mean, I agree with Gary. I think it's all about setting a strategy, having a roadmap, and then measuring that velocity. So how quickly now can IT get X number of stories through a sprint? Can we start to take the bottlenecks in our systems and business and say, hey, if we were able to break this off into a microservice, spin off a team just to work on that certain area and functionality, we can go this much quicker, therefore to hitting these goals over time. And that's how you strategically grow your business these days.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
And I would say that the evolution of these KPIs also have been evolving over time. So IT may be, in the example you used in the 90s, they would be on the hook to uptime of the servers at the data
Right.
center.
Yes.
They were on the hook on how fast can you bring up our new commerce system.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, that is provided as a service, which allowed IT to have a different KPI.
Yes.
What is the security posture that the solutions in this organization need to have in order to meet the business demands?
Yes.
What is the reliability of this infrastructure? How fast are the teams delivering new versions of this solution so our commerce engine is always the best in the market? So the KPIs today are much more close to the business stakeholder
Right.
than to IT infrastructure than
Right.
ever before, and that's a great thing.
It's speaking the language of the business, right? And so many functions have gone through this shift, right?
They have.
Marketing's gone through this shift. IT is going through this shift where we're not like, I have clicks.
Yeah.
You know,
there's
it's about the
def-
business.
There's definitely, there's a business, we're talking DevOps, WebOps, FinOps. You know,
Right.
they're all
RevOps,
moving-
it's
they're
all- everyone gets
driving
an
through
ops.
that.
Yeah.
And the last, and I completely agree with this alignment between business and IT for that cost contribution. The one that I've seen that was most interesting was also measuring a percentage of proactive activity versus reactive
Oh, very
activity,
interesting.
which
Yeah.
ties back to automation. So the more that you can drive proactive, you mentioned earlier, knowledge being surfaced at the time that you need it, the reaction time you have for answering a customer's question, those are going to drive better customer experiences. So how can we bring more proactive actions to bear by bringing on more of the different departments into the cloud, sharing data, sharing these processes across each other? Then you can start to see that shift in that percentage from
Absolutely.
proactive and reactive.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that is everyone tired of telling pandemic stories yet?
Oh,
Or do we have like one more round in us? Come on.
Sure.
Come on, one more.
There's so many
Lightning
stories.
round, right. So, I think that there are a lot of stories of lessons learned and, not just businesses that shifted and people that had to pivot, but really like they kind of, they were like these light bulb aha moments for people where it really, and not just for IT or not just for the front line of experience, right? I mean, at the board level, the light went on because they were like, oh, dang, we can't be in the office anymore? Oh, so that's what you guys have been talking about a mobile workforce, right? Like
That's
light
what
bulb
cloud
moments.
is. That's why the servers.
Right, oh,
became
that's
real.
why. That's why we're not rolling racks down the hill, right? So what were some of those, like what are some of your favorite, like this is the best aha moment with cloud and through the pandemic? What are some of those stories?
For me, it was telemedicine.
Yeah.
For me, that was
nice,
the
yeah.
biggest shift from an industry that was very focused on face-to-face, now moving completely remote.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been possible if you didn't have the right infrastructure in place to be able to do that shift.
Yeah.
And just think of how many different people they affected. In fact, I had a friend who was a doctor, and she's like, I was seeing patients. I'm not sure if my business can even grow that way. And then found she could do it even further beyond her region because there was this accessibility to it. So for me, telemedicine was the one industry that truly grabbed onto it and made the most of it.
Yeah.
And I think what's so interesting is you're starting to see hospital systems and healthcare networks deciding that they are a telehealth business first, and that they're kind of almost their like VIP treatment, like they can actually charge more for those other for different services, but it changed the balance sheets. Where they weren't spending costly time on things that could be handled in telehealth,
Exactly.
which is amazing.
Another example that comes to mind is education.
Yeah.
It was more,
Oh,
it came
gosh,
up more
yes.
as a wake-up call, and how fast could school districts get a curriculum that has been paper-based and make it a digital curriculum to be able to help kids. And some got there faster than others, but it was a big wake-up call to the entire education segment.
Yeah.
And now I believe that a year and a half, almost 2 years after the pandemic began here in the US, with a much better level of helping kids digitally than we were 2 years ago, either in a full hybrid environment or even on class.
Yeah.
Now, the kids are back to school in most places in the country, but the aspects of the digitalization of the way they're receiving education remains there, which I think it's fundamental because that's the world they will face when they grow up.
Precisely.
Right?
It's the world they're in right now.
Exactly.
You know, they're not accessing content and being like, well, I can't read that because I can't go to the library. They're like, or I could just do
Right
this,
here.
Mom. Right, it's that look on their faces, right? So absolutely education changed. I think the most interesting stories of when education changed is when we didn't put the burden of technology on the teachers and on the kids, where it just worked. Like, hey, we're gonna put this in front of you and you're gonna be able to see your teacher, you're gonna be able to get your assignments, you can interact with your friends, instead of, okay, Mom and Dad, you're a CIO now, you know, like, you're just, like every principal was suddenly like, you know, in DevOps. We were like,
It took a few
whoa.
months to get everything
Exactly.
there.
It was a big wake-up call.
Yeah, I love it, I love it.
And along with education, one of the most inspiring stories I heard was even in the higher education in colleges, where people were able to go back to school
Yeah.
because they had time on their hands, right? And the colleges see it as a new channel of being able to say, well, I'm no longer limited just to my one region.
Right.
I can now offer my classes worldwide.
Right.
And having that on demand and opening it up for others who might not be able to travel to that location.
Right.
Now all of that experience and knowledge can be shared globally. And that to me was just inspiring to see the
I mean,
reach.
how many of us started thinking differently about our teams?
Oh, yeah.
Right? If you had to hire someone,
How many people we hired remotely and at
Right.
distance and hadn't met them in a year.
but it was never and it wasn't a conversation of, when we get out of the pandemic, we still should have people who can come to our offices.
Right.
It eliminated that part of the conversation where we could now say, it doesn't matter where you are.
As long as you have connectivity.
As long as you have connectivity, right? But for our systems, for our documents, for our collaboration, for how we work, we had to figure out those cloud tools pretty quickly. Because work had to change. Like how we work fundamentally changed because of that.
And I would just say, as a software provider, to add to that point, it's my responsibility to make sure I can provide that in a secure, scalable way.
Right.
It's all of a sudden, enterprise software became cool again.
Right, like really
I can do
fast,
this with
right?
an open source website provider. Sure.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking my medical records.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
No, I need this to be reliable, that it's
Yeah.
accessible. But then on top of that, just another surprise to answer your point, governments.
Yeah.
I've not worked much in government, but
You're like, that was a unique one, yeah.
I've got clients all around the world, and what are they? I need 1,000 business processes online in 6 months.
Right.
Because I don't.
Or vaccine rollout. Or
All of it.
Oh,
how
yeah.
quickly that had to pivot.
And it has to be available on the cloud. It's got
Contact
to be able to
tracing.
scale. All of that. Think about all
Yeah.
those systems that had to get put in place.
Yeah.
That's what we were powering, and thankfully we had the tech to do it. But it
Yeah.
puts pressure on increased automation, making the tools easier to use, making them more available, to empower use of all that data.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, the sky's the limit on this.
I mean, it brings up certain keywords that every single one of you have used, right? And this is what I find fascinating about this conversation. In order to do that, you needed to have the confidence in the data so that you could have a talent supply chain in place so that you could actually engage and think differently and then deliver differently, regardless of who was delivering that. Without the confidence in being able to do that, without the agility of being able to do that, you would have still been sitting there with someone in the background being like, don't we just have to make a website? Like that would have been the totality of the conversation, and we'd still be waiting for like vaccine rollouts, right? Like that's the reality of the situation that we're in. But I mean, and I think to your point, for a lot of software vendors, it became an age of, you guys really had to sell confidence. You had to sell platforms that people didn't just like using or want to use or were efficient to use. They had to trust every single day that they were coming onto a platform and it was going to work in the way they expected it to protect the things that were supposed to be protected, was secure, had the services that you were promising at the very beginning, that everything was accessible. It changed the definition of what trust really means
Completely.
to the buyer.
Yep.
And that was a pretty big shift that happened.
Yeah.
And it changed not only from the technology, but there was a people change too that had to happen to align, to be able to take all those fast processes. Sure, I can deploy an update to the website overnight, right? Or maybe even in seconds. But are the processes and the people changed aligned to that?
Right.
And unfortunately, we found that only 4% of organizations have truly aligned
Wow.
all the way through across the entire business. Sure, pockets are great. You know, you can get web ops, DevOps. You know,
Yeah.
they've kind of been living this way for a while.
Yeah.
But try to get your finance or your legal team to act in that same pace of innovation,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
same pace of deployment. It's completely different. And the audiences, we just saw that baby boomers are providing the biggest increase to B2B commerce online. Last year it was 49%. This year it's 65%.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a
interesting.
huge
Yeah.
growth,
Yeah.
huge growth. And that is changing the audiences that
Yeah.
we have to
Completely.
sell to. We have
Yes.
to think about differently. And so all the
Market
ways, all the marketing ways that you're trying to reach, and you're doing that across regions, languages,
Yeah.
cultures.
Cultures.
You know, now you start to multiply that. The opportunity is there. Why do I have to worry about the tech, right? Don't.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Leave it
Take the
to-
friction of that
Take
out.
that out, leave it with IT, put it in the cloud, and then
Right.
I can focus on, I need a piece of that baby boomer
Yeah.
opportunity.
The tech,
How do
to
I
use
get
a very
that?
old analogy, the cloud tech needs to be like dial tone.
Yeah.
Remember the 80s?
Yeah.
You
Oh my
picked up that
gosh,
thing
yes.
called phone, you put here, the
Yeah.
dial tone was
There.
there. You never had to think about it.
Right.
So technology and innovation has become already dial tone. It's just there. You just need to tap into it.
When
and
the
use it.
innovation was getting the extra long cords, you could take it to another room.
Oh, that was awesome.
Right? That's how I got a phone in my room, I'm not gonna lie.
Me
I was
too,
like,
actually.
ding, like I would drag that bad boy over.
How long can that wire
Right,
be?
exactly. So what comes next? I mean, I think that becomes kind of a great place to kind of land here, because I think that a lot of times in previous years, like last year, let's be honest, when we would talk about transformation, people would kind of talk about it like it was this great destination, and then like there would be a voice that would come over the loudspeaker and be like, "You have arrived," and you're like, "No, like that's not going to happen. Like that's not how digital transformation works. That's not how cloud works. Like a ding doesn't happen." So we're on this treadmill that never stops. Like we're officially the hamster on the loop. But we're driving to different places. We're driving to business-driven places. We're not driving to transformation for transformation's sake, which is something that I've heard you say a lot as we've been together. Where is next, right? Like where are you seeing really cutting-edge, new thinkers looking?
Yeah, to me, I love looking through history and seeing like these patterns change. Right, for many years, the world lived out of gold. Gold defined how civilizations commerced with one another. Over the last 150 years or so, the new gold was oil. Oil dictated a lot how large economies exchange value with one another. We have surpassed to a new era, a new age, if you will, and that is data. Data today is the new gold or the new oil. And if we fast forward the tape long enough, it goes back to how can you harvest value out of the data assets, that data lake that I was talking about? How fast can you do that? How can you tap into a safe, secure, the point that you are bringing on a common data platform and exchanging data with your ecosystem? Companies that start tapping into that value, innovative value creation through data to offer customers with new business model, new ways to procure, will really be the ones that will differentiate themselves. And at Google, we provide a lot of services that can facilitate that through analytics, through machine learning, through AI. And we see a lot of companies tapping into that to really build the next business process for the next, not 10 years. The future is much closer now. We could talk about for the next 5 months even,
exactly.
that will drive that new and innovative business model that we haven't seen before, but yet it becomes a home run. So to me, it's all about harvesting data, speed of innovation on data, driving quickly to knowledge, applying that into a new business model, offer that to the customer. How fast you can do that over and over and over, I think that will define a lot of what we'll see in the future.
I like it. What comes next?
I think the gap between the big players like Amazon and Walmart and what they had been doing the last 5 years versus the smaller players is going to close and has closed significantly because of technologies like cloud native. We are seeing, you know, the whole buy online, pick up in store. We're seeing omni-channel just explode. We were saying it for years. Hey, retailers, you should get on board with this. And with the digital transformation and with the pandemic, there I said that word again, it's forced everyone to just have a quick wake-up call to say, we need to innovate, we need to do quickly. The pieces of the technology are out there. We can assemble things much faster to compete.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's what's going to get interesting is there's so many more options than just the big players out there, and that gap it will close.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it.
Well, I'll reiterate, innovation, omni-channel.
Yeah.
And then adding into that would be rethinking, reimagining how content, because we're all content producers in some way, in our personal lives, even in our work lives. That democratization of how content gets created and published out is going to mean we have to rethink. It's no longer just going to be an email or SMS text or a document. It's now going to move into AR and VR. You know,
Right.
what we would have thought about gaming in the past, okay, so now we've incorporated gaming in terms of how we watch our movies, how we watch all these other
Right.
things. So rethinking through the channels, using the latest technologies that have to be processed in the cloud because we can't run them natively anymore, right? We have to extend it and pull it and plug it together. Then the ideas of innovation just start to bloom. And that to me is going to be the most exciting part of it, is to see what comes next with that innovation based on those channels.
Yeah, I mean, and it is all going to be defined differently when we get to the metaverse.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Sorry, just,
She
you know,
said
had to,
it.
you know,
Oh,
had to say it, right? But if you're talking about immersive, bidirectional, ambient experiences that are just there and you are experiencing them through AR, VR, they are all around you, games, content, moments, experiences, all of it's going to be redefined. And we're going to have to be real crisp in our language, because there's going to be an asset, and there's going to be content, and there's going to be an experience. And while all three of those things are going to be interlinked, they're all different.
Right.
Yeah.
And that becomes really interesting. So Gary, what's going to be new?
For me, I think, and I think we're hitting on it, we've talked data. There's this notion of information that people are dying for, and then there's this notion of knowledge. And I think you're onto something here.
Yeah.
Not knowledge management systems, not that.
Yeah, no.
But it's this idea of I really need a solution or something that's going to allow me to gain knowledge to be able to take a decision. That information is going to come from all kinds of different sources. Companies are going to have to let go. And as an enterprise software provider, I got to figure out how I can give the tools to allow that, really that ability to let go and know that when that consumer engages with me at that moment that mattered, they've gotten that knowledge from multiple sources, and I can understand that, and I can really automate how they engage.
And you're relevant. You're relevant at the right time.
Customers in charge.
Yeah.
I mean, a game of us dictating the rules.
Oh yeah, that journey model of come on now, go through the
Follow
thing.
my little path.
Yeah, all gone, all
and I
gone.
think that's really
yeah.
what this is all about.
Yeah,
That to me is
absolutely.
where the focus is.
Absolutely.
Giving them the communication channels that they want to have back to the business. And we've talked a lot about customer experiences, and the next level that we've been writing about is customer transformation on themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, a simple example from a consumer side that you can understand is you put these little devices in your car that begins to track, who has the car, how fast they're driving, et cetera. But it's not just that. You're taking that data, to your point, you're analyzing it, and what's it going to do? It's going to change the driving pattern of
Right.
that consumer.
Right.
So we're changing the consumers as much as we are changing the businesses.
Yeah.
And those expectations, what you have today, that benchmark is going to move tomorrow.
different.
Very more, and then it's going to continue to
Well,
grow.
look at the fitness industry, for example. Look how much that has innovated and changed
Oh,
during,
yeah.
during the pandemic, right? Where people typically went to congregate to go to a gym and have a fitness membership is now dominated by Peloton
Right.
and
Right.
companies like Beachbody and Tonal and
Mm-hmm.
Mirror. All these things now, so everybody's working out at home and getting experiences and things that they never knew they could get, and it's just explosive growth.
But they're also being disrupted by trainer down the
Yeah.
street who figured out how to get a Zoom and is now
How to-
charging.
exactly.
You know, and it's,
Yeah.
so it, like all of these points of disruption, and when we do get to the metaverse, everybody throw some glitter on the
Yeah.
table now, thank you. When we do get there, now it's about how I was on the Peloton and my avatar, while I was pedaling, went grocery shopping, because I did that in that immersive
Yep.
experience. And that becomes the game changer, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the trainer down the street that now has a new business,
Yep.
and it's me that didn't have to leave my bike, right?
Exactly.
Now I don't have to leave my house, and that's not even because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. It's just because I'm lazy.
Or be anywhere
exactly.
in the world.
Exactly.
Or anywhere in the
Listen,
Allows you to
But it
earn
gives you-
money.
Exactly,
it gives you
exactly.
the optionality, right?
Right.
Before, you did not have that
Exactly,
option.
and the confidence to be able to get
Exactly.
there. Okay, guys, listen, thank you guys so much.
Thank
This
you,
has
Liz.
been awesome.
Absolutely.
We'll do it again next year, and we'll
Yeah.
figure out if all of our predictions were
good.
right.
Done.
Gary?
It's
Yes!
documented, it's on film.
Done, awesome.
Same location?
Same bat channel.
I love it, I love it. No, thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Thank
That
you,
was
Liz.
great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.